All right, THS Chem Squad, welcome to your first round of video notes. So to take out a sheet of paper, you're going to write down, these are a couple quick math problems just to show you how we are going to convert in the main process we're going to use for a lot of our math here this year in chemistry. So we're going to start out pretty easy, and these are going to be called unit conversions. All right, so most of the math in chemistry, we're going to be changing units from one thing to a more functional or useful unit. So all we're doing is just keeping the same amount, but putting it into a measurement that is actually better for us in terms of our calculations. So you still have the same amount of stuff, we're just measuring it a little bit differently. And in order to do this, you need to know a conversion factor. And the easiest one that comes up that we use a lot and don't really think about it is that 1 dozen of anything is 12 of them. That's called a conversion factor. We know that we can convert between a dozen and the number of items just by using that factor. Okay, so we're going to use this to go through a sample math problem and how to set them up in chemistry. So we're going to start out pretty simple. So how many eggs are there in 2.5 dozen? All right, so the way we're going to set this up is you're always going to write out your known value. So our known value is that, and the unit, is that we have 2.5 dozen. I'm going to put a DZ for dozen in this case. So we know that we have 2.5 dozen. The next thing we need to look at is what are we trying to convert this to? And we want to know how many eggs. So the next unit we're using is eggs. Now we know that our conversion factor, because we're talking about a dozen and it's just one that we know, is that 1 dozen is equal to 12 eggs. Okay, so there's our conversion factor. This is a common one. What we can do with this conversion factor is that we can flip it around and make the units work out so that we get to the desired unit, what we're trying to find. So we know we're starting with 2.5 dozen, and if we want to figure out how many eggs that is, we put our desired, or the unit we're trying to get to, up on the top of a fraction. So we're multiplying by a fraction in this case. So we're going to put eggs up here. And the unit that we're coming from, so dozen in this case, we're going to put underneath our fraction. Now this is where your conversion factor comes into play. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the numbers that go with your conversion factor and put them next to the correct unit. So 1 dozen is 12 eggs. So now there is my math problem and how I would set it up to solve this. Now many of you will do this in your head. But again, we're going to be dealing with chemistry, so things are going to be a little bit trickier. All right, so this turns into a multiplication problem. So what we do is we look at our numbers here. We take 2.5 and we multiply it by 12 and then divide by 1. So 2.5 times 12 divided by 1, which gets us an answer of 30. All right, now the next step is you got to make sure that your units cancel out so you get to the right thing. So we want to figure out how many eggs. The way we do that is we look at our problem here, and since dozens is on the top of our fraction over here and on the bottom there, it's like saying x over x if you were in algebra. X over x cancels out. Dozens over dozens cancels out. So what we're going to be left with are 30 eggs. So that is the basics of how we're going to set up a lot of our math problems in chemistry. So that one was pretty easy because we used a common conversion factor that most of us know off the top of our head. However, in the world of chemistry, things get a little bit trickier. So let's try this problem. So write this problem down and let's work through it together. If you have a 1982 penny with 1.505 times 10 to the 23rd atoms, how many moles of copper do you have? All right, so this is where we got a lot more words and different units here that you're not typically used to dealing with. So let's start with what do we know? All right, so I'm gonna circle what we know. We know that we have, or sorry, I'm gonna underline. We have 1.5 times 10 to the 23rd atoms. So that is our known or given value. And your first step is always to write that out. The unit is going to be atoms. Next thing we need to figure out is what are we trying to get to? What unit do we want to convert this into? So let's look through our problem. We want to know how many moles of copper is that. Okay, so now I'm fairly confident that most of you have not seen this term of a mole in terms of science or chemistry. We're not talking the furry creature. This is a unit of measurement. We'll talk more about this later in the year. But our conversion factor for moles is that 1 mole is equal to 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. And that's for atoms. So there's our conversion factor. All right, so what we're going to do is set it up in our math problem. So we set up a multiplication by a fraction. Again, what we're trying to get to goes on the top. We're trying to get to moles. And we need to get rid of atoms to cancel out, so that goes down here. Then it's just a matter of putting in your number value that goes with your conversion factor. So we know that 1 mole is 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd atoms. Okay, so now this looks harder because we have exponents and all that stuff involved. But really all we're doing in this case is we're multiplying 1.501 times 10 to the 23rd times 1 and dividing by 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd, which if we were to simplify this, that means we're taking 1.505 and dividing it by 6.02, and what you end up getting is 0.25. And since we have 10 to the 23rd divided by 10 to the 23rd, we know that in our math problem here, those guys are going to cancel out, and atoms are going to cancel out. So what we're going to be left with is 0.25 moles as your final answer. So when we set these problems up, you're always going to have a conversion factor. It'll be either in your reference table or in the problem, and you're going to go from one unit to the other. You set your desired, or the unit you're trying to find, up on top of your conversion factor, and then the unit you're trying to get to cancel always goes on the bottom. Then plug in your values for that conversion factor and solve the math. And it's usually going to be a simple multiplication or division problem. So we will practice some more of these in class, bring your questions, and show that you have attempted these. See you tomorrow.